It was supposed to be the worst day of my life, but I had no idea it was about to get even worse. The air was heavy with grief as we stood by my father's casket. Family, friends, old neighbors, all gathered to pay their final respects. My heart was already shattered, and while I tried to keep my composure for my mother's sake, I was drowning in silence, feeling the full weight of loss pressing on my chest. That's when my wife of 7 years approached me. I thought she was coming to comfort me. Instead, she handed me a plain white envelope, with cold, steady eyes and not a hint of hesitation. I opened it, barely able to believe what I was seeing. Divorce papers. Served. Right there, in the middle of my father's funeral. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. I looked up at her, trying to understand what was happening. Why now? Why like this? We'd had our issues, sure, but we were supposed to be working through them. Or at least I thought we were. I didn't even get a warning. No serious talk. No therapy suggestion. Just betrayal, delivered in the most heartless way possible. In front of my grieving family, no less. She turned and walked away like it was just another task on her to-do list. That moment, it changed everything. But what she didn't know was that I had already seen the cracks. The late-night calls she claimed were from work. The unexplained credit card charges. The coldness that had crept into our home like an unwanted guest. I may have looked blindsided at that funeral, but I wasn't. I had been quietly connecting the dots for months, keeping everything to myself until I had all the pieces. And let me tell you, I had more than enough. You see, I wasn't just mourning a father that day. I was burying the last shred of belief I had in the woman I once loved. But instead of falling apart, I did something else. I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt. Not because it didn't sting. But because, at that very moment, I knew something she didn't. I was 10 steps ahead. While she thought she was making the first move, she was actually playing right into my hands. I had a plan, and I was about to flip the script in a way she never saw coming. Because when someone pushes you to your lowest, that's when you find out what you're really made of. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to take back my dignity, piece by piece. She thought she had everything figured out. She thought I'd crumble. She had no idea what I'd uncovered and what I was about to do next. And the best part? She wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. After the funeral ended, I drove home in silence. My hands were clenched on the steering wheel, not from anger, but from everything I was holding back. Pain, confusion, a strange, quiet rage. I kept replaying that moment again and again. Her calm face, the envelope, the way she turned her back on me as if she hadn't just destroyed what was left of my heart. But the truth was, her timing wasn't just cruel, it was strategic. She picked the exact moment I was most vulnerable. That said everything I needed to know about the woman I'd been married to for 7 years. We met in college. She was charming, smart, full of ambition. She always had this way of pulling people in, making them feel like they were the only one in the room. I fell fast and hard, and for a long time, I thought I was the lucky one. We got married just after graduation. Bought a house 2 years later. Life looked good from the outside. But slowly, things started to change. She became distant, detached, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I blamed work stress at first, then our schedules, then myself. But it wasn't me. I know that now. About 6 months ago, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. She began keeping her phone on silent, something she never used to do. Passwords changed. Work trips that didn't line up with anything on her calendar. And the worst part? The way she looked at me, like I was someone she had already left behind. That's when I started paying attention. I didn't confront her. Not right away. I knew if I pushed, she'd just lie or cover her tracks better. So instead, I quietly observed. I made copies of receipts. Took photos of her messages when she left her phone unlocked by accident. I even installed a second cloud backup, something she wouldn't notice. I wasn't proud of it, but when your gut tells you something's wrong, you either listen or live with regret. I chose to listen, and the things I found. Let's just say the woman I loved was living a life I knew nothing about. There were hotel bookings in cities she never told me she visited. Dinners for two charged to our joint account, while she claimed to be on solo business trips. There was even one message, just one, that said enough without needing anything else. It was from a contact saved only as J. It read, "When are you telling him? He deserves to know." She never replied, but that message stayed in my mind like a ticking clock. I didn't know who Jay was. but I had a feeling I'd be meeting him soon. So when she handed me those divorce papers at my dad's funeral, part of me was already prepared. What she didn't expect was that I had already spoken to a lawyer. I had already separated our finances. I had a file with everything I needed, proof, screenshots, even recorded phone calls. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was truth. And I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would break through the mask she wore so well. The question now wasn't whether she was hiding something. The question was, how far was she willing to go to keep her secrets buried? And how much longer could she keep pretending before it all came crashing down? The days after the funeral felt like I was living in a fog. People came and went, offering their condolences, dropping off food, checking on my mom. But all I could think about was her. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and the quiet storm that was building behind the scenes. She acted like nothing happened. Still lived under the same roof. Still made her coffee in the morning. Still scrolled through her phone on the couch, like we weren't about to go to war. But I saw right through it. That calm, collected face was just a mask. And I knew that under it. She was scrambling. She thought she was in control. What she didn't know was that I'd already moved all the important documents out of the house. Bank statements, contracts, backup drives, all hidden safely away at a friend's place. She didn't know I had access to her email or that I'd seen the hidden folder she kept under a fake work account. Photos, messages, flight bookings. Every detail told a story, and none of it included me. Then there was Jay, the mystery man. At first, I wasn't sure who he was. But one night, while she was in the shower, a message popped up on her tablet. She forgot it was still synced to her phone. It was him. Still no update. She didn't respond right away. But when she did, her reply chilled me. He's suspicious. But he hasn't said anything. I think we're still okay. Still okay? That line sat with me like a bad taste I couldn't get rid of. She wasn't just ending our marriage. She was hiding something bigger. I just didn't know what yet. Meanwhile, I started piecing things together from another angle. I reached out to a mutual friend, one she hadn't spoken to in a while, but someone who always had a good sense of what was really going on. When I asked about her recent trips, he hesitated, then said something I didn't expect. She told me she was staying with her cousin during the conference. But her cousin posted pictures that weekend, and she wasn't even in town. That confirmed it. She had been lying about more than just her feelings. And now, the web she spun was starting to fall apart. The strange part? She never asked why I didn't react to the divorce papers. No confrontation. No discussion. It was like she was waiting for something else, like the papers were only part of the plan. That scared me more than anything. What if this wasn't about ending things? What if she needed the divorce finalized quickly for another reason? A new marriage? A legal trick to protect assets? Or something worse? The deeper I dug, the more I felt like I was staring into a black hole. Everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved was unraveling. And the more I learned, the more dangerous it felt to stay silent. But I wasn't ready to show my cards yet. Not until I knew everything. Not until I knew exactly who Jay was, and what he meant when he said he deserves to know. Because something told me. I hadn't seen the worst of it yet. A week passed, and the silence between us grew louder. We still shared the same roof, but barely any words. She moved like a stranger in our home. Careful, watchful. I pretended not to notice. She was trying to act normal, going to work, coming back, cooking dinner some nights like nothing had changed. But every movement she made felt rehearsed, calculated. I knew she was waiting for something, maybe expecting me to snap, to break down, to question her. But I didn't. And that must have scared her more than any confrontation ever could. Meanwhile, I kept digging. Late one night, after making sure she was asleep, I pulled out the second phone I'd been using for weeks. It was linked to an account she didn't know I had access to. That's when I found it. A chain of messages between her and Jay. Not just from recent weeks, but months back. One in particular made my stomach turn. I wish he'd just sign already. We'd be free. He won't see it coming, Jay replied. He's too distracted with his dad. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. My father's death was an opportunity to her. That was when it truly hit me. This wasn't a woman falling out of love. This was someone who had been planning my exit like a business deal. Cold. Strategic. Like I was nothing more than an obstacle between her and whatever life she had planned with this guy. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 days later. I followed her. She said she had to work late, again. I waited 30 minutes, then drove out. I didn't have to go far. Her car was parked 2 blocks from a hotel downtown. I watched from across the street as she walked out, not alone, but with a man. Tall, sharp suit, slick back hair. He put his hand on her lower back like he'd done it 100 times. She laughed, touched his arm. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. And then, just before they got in his car, I snapped a picture. One clear shot. No doubt. No excuses. That night, I stared at the image for hours. I wasn't even angry. I just felt empty. But I knew one thing. This wasn't going to end with just a quiet signature and a clean break. She had lied, cheated, manipulated, and now she was trying to walk away without facing any consequences. I couldn't let that happen. So, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I printed every message, every photo, every transaction. I made copies. Sent one to my lawyer, another to her work email, and one, just one, I mailed to her mother. Not out of spite, but because I wanted her to know that I knew. All of it. The next morning, she was quiet. Too quiet. She didn't touch her coffee. Didn't ask why I was dressed in a suit at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. She didn't know I had a meeting with someone she never expected me to find, because I had finally discovered who Jay really was. And what I learned changed everything. The man she had been meeting, Jay, wasn't just a random fling. His name was Julian Reed, and he wasn't some co-worker or stranger from the gym. He was her ex. The one she told me had moved to another state years ago. The one she claimed had been toxic and part of a past she'd left behind. But clearly, the past wasn't as buried as she made it seem. When I met with a private investigator, someone I had hired quietly a few weeks before, he handed me a thick envelope with records, photos, and one detail that sent chills down my spine. Julian Reed wasn't just some rebound. He had a criminal record, fraud, manipulation, and even an ongoing investigation in another state related to a company he had bankrupted using fake identities and forged documents. And now, somehow, he had slithered back into my wife's life, and into mine, quietly, through her. I started to piece it together. The sudden urgency in her wanting the divorce, the rushed papers, the secrecy. It wasn't just about love or betrayal anymore. This was about money, about control, and about using me. You see, 3 months before my father passed away, he transferred part of his estate into my name, an investment property worth more than I ever imagined. I didn't think much of it at the time. Dad wanted to protect certain assets in case things got messy, but now it made sense. She knew. Somehow, she found out about the transfer. Maybe she read one of Dad's emails. Maybe she snooped through my documents. Either way, she knew I had something valuable, and she wanted to get out before I realized what she was really after. The timing wasn't a coincidence. And that's when I realized something darker. Julian had been at the funeral. Not in the crowd. Not next to her. But there, in the distance, watching. I remembered seeing a man standing under a tree near the back gate. I thought he was just a stranger paying respects from afar. But now, when I looked back at the security footage from the church's outdoor cameras, I saw him. Clear as day. Sunglasses, pressed jacket, emotionless face. Watching her. Watching me. It wasn't just an affair. It was a setup. And if Julian's record was anything to go by, he didn't just use women for companionship. He used them to gain access, to information, to money, to leverage. And my wife? She wasn't just his partner. She was his bait. That night, as I stood in the kitchen pretending to wash dishes, she walked past me with her suitcase in hand. She said she was going to clear her head for the weekend. I nodded, dry hands gripping the counter. She had no idea what I now knew. And she had no idea what I was about to do. Because the next time we spoke, I wouldn't just be confronting her about Julian. I'd be confronting them both. Together. And when I did, I wouldn't just be one step ahead. I'd already be holding all the cards. The plan was already in motion by the time she walked out with her suitcase. I had followed every thread, traced every lie, and now I was ready. I knew exactly where she was going. Julian's condo downtown, under a fake name, paid for through a company that didn't exist on paper anymore. What she didn't know was that I had already been there. The next evening, I waited. I didn't knock. I didn't cause a scene. I simply had my lawyer schedule a meeting with both of them. Through an anonymous legal notice, they were invited to a dispute resolution session at a neutral office. She thought it was about the divorce. Julian likely thought it was some kind of formality. Neither of them knew that when they walked into that room, I'd be sitting at the end of the table with 2 attorneys and a flash drive full of everything: photos, messages, financial records, even recordings. They walked in smiling. She looked confident, wearing the same perfume she wore on our first anniversary. Julian stood behind her like he owned the place, eyes cold, chin up. I didn't speak at first. I just pressed play. The screen on the wall lit up. Their messages scrolled one by one. Their photos at the hotel. The payment records. Then Julian's real identity. The criminal charges. The shell companies. The fraud cases. The smile slowly faded from her face. Julian's eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. "You've been using her," I said quietly. "But she let you." She tried to speak, to shift blame, to play victim, but my lawyer raised his hand. "I suggest you both listen closely," he said, placing 2 envelopes on the table. "Because what comes next isn't optional." The first envelope contained the restraining order, filed that morning. The second? A civil lawsuit for fraud, emotional distress, and attempted financial manipulation, backed by enough evidence to keep both of them in court for years. And the twist? I had already finalized the transfer of my father's estate into a trust. It was no longer in my name, legally untouchable. She couldn't take what no longer existed on paper. The money she thought she was walking away with? Gone. Protected. Locked. Julian stood, furious, accusing me of entrapment. My lawyer smiled calmly. "You should worry less about entrapment and more about the federal fraud case reopening in Nevada. They're very interested in your recent movements." I didn't have to say another word. I stood up, looked at her one last time, not with hate, but disappointment, and walked out. But just as I reached the door, she whispered something I'll never forget. I was pregnant. I paused, but didn't turn. "Was," she said again. "Not anymore." I kept walking. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't believe her. Not after everything. And if it was true, she had chosen lies and manipulation over family. That was her burden now. Outside, the air felt different. Like the weight was finally lifting. I had lost my father. I had nearly lost myself. But in the end, I gained something far more valuable. Clarity, strength, freedom, and the full truth, no matter how painful, was finally mine. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Not empty, just calm. For the first time in months, I didn't have to pretend. No more double-checking her stories. No more questioning my sanity. The house still felt heavy, sure, but it was my space again. And in that silence, I began to rebuild. Not just my routines, but myself. She didn't come back. There were no calls, no apologies, no final messages trying to explain it all away. Julian, on the other hand, was gone within a week. I heard from my lawyer that he left the city after being contacted by federal investigators. Whether she went with him or not, I didn't care. That chapter was closed. I moved forward slowly, went back to work, spent more time with my mom, who still hadn't fully recovered from losing dad. In fact, I told her everything, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't want to carry the weight alone. She listened, held my hand, and said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the people closest to us are just passing through, but the ones who stay, they're the ones who make us whole again. I took that to heart. The divorce finalized a few months later. Clean. Uneventful. She didn't fight back, not after what had come to light. There was nothing left for her to take. The trust Dad set up kept the estate safe, and with the legal protections in place, she walked away with nothing she hadn't earned herself, which, frankly, wasn't much. But this story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about clarity. About the moment you realize your world was built on lies, and deciding not to let those lies define you. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It broke something in me. But in that breaking, I found something else: resilience. I started therapy, began journaling, joined a support group for people who had gone through similar betrayals. It helped, in ways I didn't expect. Turns out, there are more people out there carrying silent pain than I ever realized. And sharing it, being real about it, helps you breathe again. A few months later, I took a walk past the cemetery where we buried Dad. I sat by his stone, told him everything. About her. About Julian. About how I made it through. I told him I kept his trust safe, that I honored his name even when it would have been easier to just walk away. I like to think he'd be proud. Now, I don't look back with anger. Just understanding. She served me divorce papers at my dad's funeral thinking she'd already won. But what she didn't realize was that I'd been 10 steps ahead, not just legally, but emotionally, I had already started letting go the day she stopped being honest. To anyone listening who's gone through betrayal, I'll say this: you don't have to win the fight with fire. Sometimes strength looks like silence. Sometimes victory is simply refusing to be broken. Because healing doesn't come from revenge, it comes from truth. And sometimes, the truth is the very thing that sets you free.